It's not so inappropriate, though, that sometimes we feel muted. Like we know that we have something important to say, but it's not quite coming out and it's not being heard. And so I want to give space to address that. Okay, so I will begin formally. As I think I said in the email, this is the first time I've done this kind of online live class, so bear with me if I have any technical issues. Mostly, though, I want to just share with you, I've been working as a writer and thinking about writing and literature for my whole life. I have a PhD in English. In the middle of my PhD program, I moved up to Cambridge to work with a poet who teaches at Harvard, Joy Graham, and really focused on writing my own poetry, and then moved into writing creative nonfiction. And I'm going to switch to active speaker. And then, so really then taught literature, taught creative writing at the university level. I taught at MIT and Lesley, and then I started to do things a little bit differently. And because of my own personal journey, started to see where I could access my full story through writing and where I needed other tools. And so I'll be talking a little bit about that. But there were times that even though I was a writer, having spent my life thinking about writing, I myself felt muted, and I needed to find other ways in to access my authentic voice. So I am Nadia Colburn, and welcome. I made a little PowerPoint presentation, so I'm going to share my screen with you, and let's see if this works. So share screen and PowerPoint, share screen, and let me go back. Can you see the PowerPoint? And can you still see me at the same time? Okay, thank you. Thank you for the nods and the thumbs up. So, okay, so here we are. How to access the full power of your creative voice. And I already gave you a little bit of introduction, but I'll tell you just a little bit more that as I said, I had a lot of formal training as a creative writer and as a kind of literary critic with a lot of fancy credentials. And so, you know, I had all this kind of authorities telling me that I could use my voice, but in some ways I still felt quite cut off from my own voice. And especially in my kind of early 30s, and I was a mom to 2 young kids, and trying to put together the life of the mind with the life of being a mother and the life of the heart and the life of the body. And I felt fragmented a lot of the time. And then I went through a period of pretty intense personal healing and growth. And part of what was happening with that was I needed to go back and re-examine my story. Even though I had been writing my whole life, you know, that there were pieces of my story that I hadn't been able to access. And I was able to access those more through, I did a lot of things, you know, talk therapy, but also body-oriented therapy. And then the philosophy of Thich Nhat Hanh was just life-altering for me. Meditation and yoga. Yoga because so much was stored in my body that I couldn't necessarily access just through the left brain. And so I needed to reconnect the wisdom and the knowledge and also the fears that my body were storing with the brain. Reintegrate the left brain and the right brain and come into more wholeness. And then from that place, I was able to write with a lot less anxiety. And that's why I do the work that I do, trying to bring these different domains together. And so some people ask me, well, I don't know if what you're doing is really for me because I'm just writing for my business. You know, I don't need this personal growth aspect of it. And my response is that probably what I'm offering will help you as well, because we're always working from ourself. Whatever our blocks are, we're going to bring them with us wherever we go. And these strategies that I have so that you can listen to your full creativity, and it's a kind of cycle, listen to your creativity and then express it, happens more easily when we can get through the inner blocks, come to our center, and have a real channel moving through us. So my hope is that you can use these techniques in any kind of writing that you're doing, and also even outside of your writing for speaking or just for any kind of interaction in the world. Okay, so here are some common problems people often have when they come to writing. They don't have the time. A lot of anxiety comes up. There's a feeling of a lot of blocks. People feel very isolated. There's a lack of support and we don't know where to go for support. A lot of insecurity. Am I doing this the right way? Someone else wants something else from me. Oh, maybe I should revise this way. No, maybe it was better the first time around. Lack of technical skills, like just, I never learned quite how to use this grammar, some people tell me, or I don't really know what kind of writing is wanted from me. Sometimes we have too much to say and it just comes pouring out in a jumble. We don't know how to manage it all. Sometimes we feel like we have nothing to say. So there's a sense of overwhelm, unsure of a voice, unsure of a story, lack of direction. We have a lot to say, but it doesn't cohere. Fear of revision. Some people have a fear of a blank page. Like, it's just me and this blank page or this blank screen. And that first encounter with the writing process is the hardest. And then some people have a fear of revision. They can just write and write and write, but then when it's time to revise, it's almost like looking in the mirror. Like, ooh, I don't really want to see what's there. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, there's a whole question of publication. So I'm actually going to leave the question of publication for another day. Perhaps I will offer another seminar, masterclass on publication. I get it if you want to know about publication. I do too. I did, especially. There was a time. Maybe someone came on the call late. If you're not muted, could you just maybe mute your call? Try to mute everyone. But let me just see what I can do here. I'll just ignore it. So there was a point where I was thought maybe I'd get an MFA, and I called a program up and I said, so can you help me with publication? Because I have the writing skills, but I really want the publication. They said, no, that's not what we do. So I said, forget it. That's not what I want. So I get it. Sometimes we need those skills, but I want to really focus today on the craft and power and technique that I have to offer around writing, because publication is its whole other bag of worms. And as Lamott says, people think they want to be published. They think that's all that they want, will make them happy. And then they don't know all the other mute. Can you hear me all? Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know why the screen share stopped. Well, I will just go back and unmute you all. I don't. Okay, let's see.
Good.
Does that work?
That's good.
Okay. And I'm going to mute all again. So people finding out about the smallpox and the smallpox of publication. Okay, so we'll talk about publication another day. So my question for you, though, is really, aside from publication, asking you, why do you want to write? What is it behind the writing? How can you get clear in your own writing life about connecting with your purpose? Because when you can connect with your purpose, then you can connect more easily with your voice. And so Rumi has a poem. It says, "The breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. Don't go back to sleep. You must ask for what you really want. Don't go back to sleep. People are going back and forth across the doorsill where the two worlds touch. The door is round and open. Don't go back to sleep." So I will try to share my screen again and see if this works a little better. Often we are afraid to ask for what we really want, and that itself can be a block. So I want to give you permission here to go behind what you're doing and get quiet with yourself and ask yourself, what do you really want? And can you be awake to the process itself? Because as I'm going to talk about, the process of writing can be messy. And instead of pushing away from that, thinking it's supposed to be all neat and easy, if we can be open to the process of discovery, and I think this poem is about discovering, not being afraid to go back and forth across this doorsill of discovery, of awakeness, of awareness, then we can go deeper and deeper into our creative voice or into any project that we're working on. So I think the two things that we really need are to trust the process, and I'll talk about that, and then to give ourselves a lot of supports, and I'll talk about what those supports are. So the process. Often in writing, we think either about the process or the product. So most writing classes will deal primarily with the product. And you bring your work into a workshop or a class, and then people put on their critical minds and they say, this line isn't working so well. What about if you take this out? What about if you move this around? It's all product oriented. There's not much going beneath the surface to the messy process behind it, asking you to kind of go deeper beyond the page. On the other hand, a lot of times people talk about the process. They're talking about things like journal writing, writing for therapeutic results. It's not so important what the words on the page look like. It's just about the process of writing. I think both sides kind of miss the beauty of being able to work with both together. Because if we're just working in a journal, we don't get the beauty of going back to what we've written and trying to understand what we really want to say through the process. And in that experience of making it communicable to someone else, we also make it communicable to ourselves. We get to understand ourselves better. So I thought I had a quote here from Forster, but I don't, but I'll paraphrase roughly. The novelist Ian Forster said, "How do I know what I think until I've said it?" Part of the time when we feel really blocked with our writing, it's because we expect it to come really naturally from our mind to the page. And then we think that the problem is on the page. But often the problem is in the process itself, that we are not really sure we know what we want to say. And then we feel like, oh, there's something wrong with us if we don't know what we want to say. Instead of feeling, wow, this is so exciting. This is a beautiful opportunity that this writing has given me to get more clear on what I really think and what I really believe. And when you're more clear on that, then the writing will flow more easily. But we don't want to jump over that process of discovery, because it's in that process of discovery that we have so much growth. And that if we're only looking at the product and trying to make it neat and shiny on the page, which I think happens in a lot of writing classes, we're not digging in to see what else we can learn, what else we can discover, and what other vulnerable or powerful places we have that we haven't quite fully tapped into. So I think a lot of this about tapping into the full power of our voice is changing our mindset a little bit so that we can stay with the process and trust the process and not expect immediate outcomes, but enjoy the journey. And a lot of us can't really enjoy the journey, partly because we have been conditioned by our education to perform. And writing has been very performative. And so again, I know that a lot of you are writing in kind of performative ways for your work, but bear with me, because I think that what I'm talking about is also, I hope, going to be relevant for you. So I want to just make a little digression here and talk about the history of authorship and authority. So the way we learn to write in school is usually, not always, but often, quite guided and directed, and we almost always wrote with a grade attached, following teachers' assignments and with pretty immediate judgment. So a lot of us, when we sit down to write, we have that teacher looking over our shoulder, giving us a grade. And I think that really gets in the way. And it's paradoxical, because yes, maybe you need to write for work, and so you need to do a good job. But because we have that kind of authority figure over our shoulder, we actually get blocked from being able to be in contact with our own authority, which is what allows us to access our own powerful authorship. So if you just take a moment, let's close our eyes and reconnect with our breath and our body. And now imagine that whatever you write is going to be handed into your teacher, and you're going to be given a grade on it. How do you feel in your body when you imagine that teacher reading your work and grading it? And I know you're all muted, unfortunately. So I'm going to just kind of let you make some notes of that, and then at the end, there'll be time for a conversation. So, okay, a little bit of background. The definition of author is from the Latin word, and I'm not going to pronounce this correctly, ogere, I don't know if that's correct, to promote, to make grow, and from aucteur, to he who makes things happen. And I read several definitions, and in several definitions, the word father appeared. But in no definitions did the word mother appear. So whether you're a man or a woman, there are certain assumptions about what authority looks like, what makes things grow, and what doesn't make things grow. And then authority has the same root word as author. And in the mid-14th century, the definition of authority was the power to enforce obedience. And in the mid-19th century, it was those in charge, oops, I have a typo, those with police powers. And today it's still to enforce obedience. So our own authorship often in our subtle consciousness, unconscious mind, and in the history with which we've come to writing through our education, often has to do with this enforced obedience. And it's very hard to come into our own power when we're working within a kind of police system. But over time, the G or C in author and actor changed to a TH. And that TH came from the word authenticity, which means genuine or principled. And it means acting on one's own authority. So I invite you really to, as much as possible, when you sit down to write, take a moment and kind of let that teacher over your shoulder walk into the other room. Or as it happens, I'm married to a teacher. I'm a teacher, and I'm married to a high school teacher of all things, a high school English teacher who laments needing to grade papers. But you can make friends with that teacher, right? And invite yourself to act on your own authority. So how do we do that? First of all, I think just understanding the process is really important. Coming to self-trust, understanding that when we write, that inner critic is probably going to come up. And so instead of being blocked by it, we can just ask it gently to step aside. And we'll tell it that, yes, we do want support from an editor later, and I'll talk about that support later. But for the first writing process, we really invite the inner critic to step aside and be willing to be messy and reconnect with the self. So that's trusting the process. But we want to reconnect with the self, but we don't really want to be totally isolated with the self. I'm going to skip ahead because it just comes here. I'm going to just read this funny quote from Kafka, how often we're isolated with our writing. So this is a quotation from Kafka. Writing means revealing oneself to excess. This is why one can never be alone enough when one writes, why even night is not night enough. I have often thought that the best mode of life for me would be to sit in the innermost room of a spacious, locked cellar with my writing things and lamp. Food would be brought and always put down far away from my room outside the cellar's outermost door because he doesn't want anyone to come near him. And the walk to my food in my dressing gown, he's not even going to get dressed, through the vaulted cellars would be my only exercise. I would then return to my table, eat slowly and with deliberation, and then start writing again at once. And how I would write, from what depths I would drag it up. So this is kind of I love Kafka's writing, but it's also kind of the cliche of the miserable, isolated writer who sits in the cellar. There's no natural light. There's no one around. There's no human contact. His body, basically he says he wants almost no exercise. And he's just closed in and in and in and in. And I was teaching The Metamorphosis, Kafka's amazing story about Gregor, who turns into a cockroach. I was teaching this book in a course at MIT many years ago now. And one of the students came up to me after class and said, "That was my favorite book ever. I think I've discovered my genre. Can you direct me to more books where people become bugs?" And he was such a nice guy. But I really felt like I wish I could also offer him therapy and yoga and movement. And, because at the end of The Metamorphosis, this poor Gregor Samsa, who first turns into a cockroach, ends up dying, and his family, pelt him with rotten apples, and he's miserable and unhappy and dies. And so I wanted to offer this as like what we don't want to do. We don't want to isolate ourselves in our writing process. We want to be able to bring our whole and healthy self to our writing. And again, I think that we have a very unfortunate assumption about what we need to tap into our creativity. And I want to really work against that. So, some supports. Understanding the process. Meditation, I'll talk more about that. Yoga. Time management. Reading, because if we're going to be writing, it's really, really important to also be reading. And have other people on the journey with you so you're not isolated. And those people are peers, they're coaches for the emotional side of it and also the practical editing side, and readers and editors. Okay, so I'm going to go through this a little bit. So the supports, this is something that I offer that a lot of people don't. And I found it so, so powerful in my own life and also working with hundreds and hundreds of students now. So often our writing life brings up a lot of anxiety and we get really cut off in the left brain. We get to be like that poor Kafka in his cell without any light, all alone, not moving our body. So when we come into meditation a little bit, it doesn't need to be a lot, but just we recenter, we can come out of the static that's in our mind and we can let the silt kind of settle, and then the water becomes clear and we can see where we want to go. So I'm going to stop the screen share for a moment so I can check in with you all. And I'm going to just give us a moment to breathe together. So reconnect with your breath and reconnect with your body. So I was going to give you a little bit of time to do a writing exercise now, but I think that some of you might not have as much time as I have allotted for this whole class. So I think I'll do the exercise at the end. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just quickly unmute you all and just pause for a moment and see if you want to step in with any questions or comments now, because I've been talking for a while. No? Okay. Well, this is, a lot of what I offer is really about giving you time to practice. And one of the things I like about my online class, Align Your Story, for example, is that you get to listen to it at home at your own pace and then really practice a lot and tune into yourself and practice with the meditation and the yoga. Because again, it's both like having the authority to give us guidance, but then practicing with ourselves. And so there's this funny slight paradox here that I'm just talking at you the whole time when I'm trying to encourage you all to kind of trust your own inner authority, but different we all need tools, and that's the other thing. It's like we all do need support. So I hope that you're finding this helpful. And I'll just continue talking.
Can I ask a question? Can you hear me, Nadia?
Yes.
This is Ashley. Okay, good. Hi. I'm sorry I didn't get my question to you sooner than this morning, literally an hour before the class, so I don't know if you've seen it or not. But my question is, I find these sessions that you offer so beneficial because it really does, I hate that word center. I don't know why, but it really does clear my mind by making me be focused in this moment and only this moment. I feel as though you asked us to think about what our purpose for writing is. And for me, there has never been any other purpose but to experience that process of discovery. It's really kind of addictive when you have sort of a general idea of what you want to communicate and you feel blocked, like you don't know how to express, to make another, you don't know how to say the words that another person will hear, and then you start the process and all of a sudden magic happens, and then you look back and you're like, wow, that's magic. I used to do my writing compulsively, and when I started meditating, it became much more focused. My writing became much more focused and much...
That's great.
Yeah, it doesn't take 17 drafts anymore to get to something that I like. But my question is, for people who have body issues, I'm wondering, would yoga amp that up, the experience that I have for meditation, and make me a more focused writer? And if so, how does that happen? Can you describe that?
Yeah, actually, this is perfect timing.
Okay.
The next thing I want to talk about is yoga.
Okay.
So we're on the same wavelength.
Okay.
So yes, thank you for that question. And I will go back, if that's okay with you all, then, to the presentation and answer that question.
Okay. Perfect.
And I think that what you said is really true, that sometimes, if we bring in these different practices, the process becomes just easier. It's there. You don't have to go through, I think you use, and now I can't quite remember the word. It was something like the agony of 17 drafts or whatever, but it just flows a little bit more easily. And yes, so the yoga can help that as well. So I'm going to go back to the share screen and the PowerPoint and share screen. Is that working? Let's see. Okay, so first of all, yoga can mean very different things for different people. And for me, I really like yoga as a physical practice. I also encourage people to walk. I've had some students who have written the most amazing poems in walking. So they'll record into their phone, and I can always tell which poems have been composed that way, because there's a real fluidity and ease often in those poems. And you can do this too, whether you're even if you're writing a business document. Moving the body, there's a lot of evidence that shows that when we can be moving, we can access more parts of our brain. And so we come out of that stuck energy. So whatever way you can access moving your body, I recommend. You don't need to do fancy down dogs if that doesn't work for your body. There are famous yoga teachers who are in wheelchairs. So the word yoga means union. And it's that union of mind and body that we're trying to get at. It's that awareness of how the body is holding and storing our energy, where and how it's caught, and where and how we can release it. So with accessing that full creative voice, if we're only up here, and this is metaphorical, of course, but only in that little left brain, we're missing out on our full being and full potential. It's like trying to lift weights with just the, bicep muscles. We have to tap into that core strength if we're going to do, I'm not a weightlifter, but I think Marie is on this call. And I know, Marie, you are a weightlifter, and you talk really beautifully about accessing that full core strength to tap into that full power to lift something. And I think it's the same with our voice. If you're an opera singer, you need to learn how to tap into your full lung strength, right? That put your kind of weight behind your voice. And so just sharing my own personal story, and I have an extreme story, which is that part of what happened to me in early childhood, I didn't consciously remember, but it was my body remembered. And so in my 30s, I started to remember, but I realized it had been stored in my body the whole time. And this is what happens with trauma, that the mind and the body kind of split and it needs to be reintegrated. But in this extreme case, it shows us how the body and mind work together and how they cannot work together. And so in less extreme cases, we can just be reminded, oh yes, the body has this core energy. And when we picture our teacher or imagine our teacher, for most of us, it's not a super traumatic event, but there's some bodily memory that's happening and our cells contract just a little bit. So if we're writing from that contracted space, we don't have the flow. So if we can expand, literally like open our chest and move and get the energy moving and flowing, then we can have new neural pathways and new habit memory in our body that we can access when we're writing. And we can tap into greater insight. And also a lot of our blocks, the things that are holding us back in our writing, are those old stored memory in our physical cells. So by accessing kind of the body's fuller range of motion, we can access our fuller emotional and also imaginative and also intellectual range. So one of the things, again, that I really like about my online class is that I can give you videos to practice with at home, and you can practice with a yoga video and pause it and then write. And you can choose which exercises you like, so you don't need to do all of the exercises. And you can pause it for as long as you want to write and then go back to it. There are disadvantages to being online, but there are also huge advantages that you can bring these practices with support home to you. Okay, so I hope that answered your question. So support leads to greater clarity. And as I said, I was going to do an exercise with you, but I'm going to leave that to the end if we have time. The other thing, and I think maybe also, Ashley, you asked me about discipline in your email. Time management is so hard for so many of us. So I just want to say it's really important to make a calendar and a schedule for yourself and to stick to it and not expect that because this is a creative process, it's just magically going to happen. On the other hand, if you're writing for work, and okay, then you have your calendar, you have to go to work and you have to write whatever project there is that you have to do, or you have to do it at home, however you work. But then I would encourage you to put on your calendar some supports so that you can come out of the anxiety that you bring to whatever writing project you have. And so you can kind of get underneath the static, come back to yourself, and then sit down. And so maybe that's, 5 minutes of meditation before you write, and put it on your calendar. Or take a break and go for a 5-minute walk and then come back to your desk. this all seems like really perhaps not essential, but I can't tell you how much difference different practices make and awareness of different practices can make in your writing. Because as Ashley said, we can be struggling with something, then we just add a little meditation and it's, whoa, I don't need those 17 drafts anymore. You might think you don't have time for the meditation, but it frees up so much more time for you, right? I see Ashley nodding. So yeah. The other support that I think is really, really important is reading. And I'm a lifelong reader. I write because I love to read. And so whatever genre you're working in, you need to be reading that genre. I always say that if you, I'm a poet, I'm also a nonfiction writer, but with poetry, pretty much everyone who reads poetry is also a poet because it's kind of infectious. Like, you want to, not everyone, but so many readers of poetry are also poets because it's a cycle. The reading feeds the craft. So if you need to write documents for your work, for example, it's really helpful to have some model texts and really take apart, how are those model texts structured? How are they working? And really know your form well. So we want to support, the intellect as well as the spirit and body. And that language of the model texts gets in our mind. It becomes kind of second nature. So if, again, choose wisely what you're reading and read as a writer, meaning look at the structure, look at the form, and read greedily so that you're taking specific techniques from what you're reading. And again, one of the things that's nice about an online class is that then I can offer lots and lots of different readings that you can do at your own pace in lots of different genres. Okay, so coming back to the Kafka, the other thing is don't be alone. So your reading is one part of creating that community of voices around you so that your voice isn't an isolated voice. But then the other thing is really finding real people who support you. So I'm not really sure, this gets back a little bit to authorship and authority, that something happened in our culture in which there's this kind of triangle around writing where the person at the top is isolated. And there's this idea that if you have authority, you have to kind of be alone with it instead of a kind of community. And it's just not true that writers write alone. Pretty much, and even Kafka, which is funny, he wrote this to a friend. He was in an active relationship and dialogue with supportive friends his whole life around his writing process. He was not writing alone in a vacuum at all. So find the people who can support you and who can support, both the emotional side and also then the words on the page. So I do a lot of one-on-one work with people where I'm doing both of those things. And I think I'm unique in being able to do both the kind of behind the page and on the page coaching. But my online class is also a way where you can get this kind of support at a much, much lower price level. And what's so great is that there's a whole community. We've had more than 100 students in the class who are around the world. So we have students in Israel, in South Korea, in Florida, in Oregon, lots of students in Massachusetts. Anyway, and it's an online community, and then you have access for life to these other writers who are writing in these ways, and you can share experiences, share writing, get feedback. And the other thing that I want to say is that we all need editors. So every book that you read has been edited, probably multiple times. It's had multiple readers, multiple people go through and edit it, line edit it. So sometimes I'll be working with clients and they'll say, when will I ever get to do this with my own work? I'll say, well, maybe never, because I work with an editor. Everyone works with an editor. We can edit someone else's work often more easily than we can edit our own. We're too close to it. We need to have that other eye, that other view. So don't be afraid to ask for support, because that's really how it's supposed to be. And I also, I started to work with writing coaches actually after I started being a coach, because I realized, wow, this is so helpful. And so I kind of reached out to some writing coaches too. And then some of them we've now kind of pair, so I offer coaching to my writing coaches and they offer coaching to me, because it's just so much nicer to be in a community with this process. So the last kind of thing I want to say is just be generous with yourself and be generous with others. Enjoy the process, prioritize it, make time on your calendar for the different aspects of it, prioritize asking for support, and give yourself permission. Because again, I think we have this idea that it's somehow, we're supposed to have it all figured out, and that mess that I talked about in the beginning is somehow self-indulgent or isn't the right way to do things. And if we can switch that mindset, then that little inner critic that comes up that says, oh, you shouldn't be doing it this way, we can push it aside and say, it's not selfish. I'm not doing anything wrong by doing it this way. And you can really be open to that whole process, which is a really generative, life-giving process. And, there's a big kind of social justice aspect to my doing this work. I see a chat, so I'm just going to, someone's, asking, do my students write in English or do they write in other languages? And my answer is both. So I'll get to that in a minute. Well, I guess I'll actually just lead that question into what I was saying about social justice in some ways, because writing is about connecting. And so in my class, the conversation is in English, but a lot of people are writing their own writing in other languages. And my class is not so much about getting a lot of workshopping of your work. You can share it for feedback, but it's not like line by line edits. So it's not a barrier to be writing in a language other than English if you can participate, in some way with the English, because obviously everything I'm offering is in English. So if you're on this call, your English is great. But I really, again, by tapping into our own authority and authenticity, we are reimagining very old hierarchical structures of authority, where only some people have a voice and where they are the ones that the rest of us are meant to be obedient to. And so we are giving permission to, in a kind of very democratic way, to open up to other voices that are different. And when we give ourselves this permission within ourselves, then we can be more available for others. When we reconnect with ourselves, we can reconnect more with others. And I see this period that we're living in as so kind of precarious, and it's, on the one hand, we're connected through social media, but on the other hand, we're more and more fragmented. And there's more and more kind of fake news and questioning of like, what's happening with authority? So to kind of come back and listen to ourselves tune into the creative process that we have within us and reintegrate, that is a kind of cumulative effect of making the world really a more dynamic, generous, compassionate, connected place. And I've seen just such beautiful community come up around this work because people are really being authentic, which we often just don't see in other places. So I invite you to allow the process. And as I said, I'm offering Align Your Story. This is a place where I offer teachings from the literature that I love across genres, across periods, from Sappho and Rumi to Tolstoy to Zora Neale Hurston to one of my favorite new authors, Ross Gay, Rebecca Solnit, Anne Lamott. And there's audio. Everything is an audio format so that if you don't have a lot of time, you can listen while you're doing the dishes. You can listen as you go for a walk. There's video format to teach you the meditations and the yoga, and then you can practice with it, and then you can pause it and write whenever you want. The lessons walk you through different aspects of writing. So we start with free writing, just getting comfortable with having a writing process, and then go to resistance, like what blocks us. We go to working with deep listening. How can we listen more deeply on all different kinds of levels? Childhood, writing from joy, revision, and then talking about how to bring our different pieces together into a unified whole and how to keep going for the long term. And what's nice about this class is it really meets you where you are. So whether you're completely new to writing, or you've published several books, you can still tap into the class because it's about giving you the tools to come to your own voice and your own creativity in slightly different ways. And people work in all different genres. So again, we have some poets, some novelists, some fiction writers, and some people who aren't necessarily creative writers, but just want to listen more deeply to their voice and access their own stories, either for work or for personal healing, because there's also a lot of deep personal healing that can come from this kind of self-reflective process where we're going inward and outward and really learning to communicate more fully. So I'm going to offer this class again, not until January of 2019. So it's on sale now. And as I said, I really think of this as my kind of most generous offering. A lot of the work that I do is one-on-one, and only some people can afford that kind of work. And I really want to have an offering where it's accessible to more people. So I try to be as generous as possible with this. Once you enroll, you have lifetime enrollment. Every time I go through the course again, you can come on. You're part of the community for life. You can come on the live question answer conference calls, which are optional, but a nice addition to the class anytime I offer them. And if you need a payment plan, I'm also happy to work with you with a payment plan. Again, I really just want to make this accessible to people. We start on April 9th, and then after April 9th, the price will go up. So you actually can do it as a self-paced course throughout the year, but you might as well, if you're going to buy it ever, buy it when it's on sale and start with the whole community when we'll be going through module by module. So I'm just going to show you, because people are like, well, what does actually it look like? And I just want to show you, if possible, just what the course looks like. So this is the first module, for example, and it's really techno easy. I am not very good technologically, and I made the website myself, and so it's easy to navigate. So you can see there's a lesson, and then you can go to the lesson, and you can listen to the audio of the lesson, or you can read it, or you can download it. And then you can return to module 1. And then there are the close readings. So this looks really carefully at specific texts. And in this first one, we look carefully at a text poem that I really love by W.H. Auden and a lot of other poets. And then there's some questions about it, the audio. Someone else is asking me a question. Are you not seeing it? Are other people not seeing my screen share? No. Let's see. Let me stop share. Sorry about that. Thank you for telling me. And I'm going to share again. It's funny that I was saying, that I was not so technologically advanced. And now, can you see it? Is that working? Can you see it now? Okay, well, here is the course. Manage participants, unmute all. Can you see the screen now?
I can.
Okay,
I can.
And so anyway, you can go through. I can, and then there's, I'll just show you one more thing, and then I'm going to open up for more questions. And then you can see there's a video of the yoga and the meditation, and then there's audio that you can practice with, and then more suggested readings and writing exercises as well. Okay, I'm going to stop the screen share and going to open it up to more questions. So thank you for your patience with my screen share that didn't work for a while, and for listening to me. And I want to open it up to any more questions that you might have.
I'll ask a question. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
I can.
Yes. Okay. Don't have my mic on, so I wasn't sure if you'd hear me. So I'm just wondering whether it's a question of genre and who I'm writing for. So I'll just say I'm writing something that's supposed to be for business use. It's supposed to be inspirational. It's kind of a movement. I know we had some dialogue through Facebook, so maybe we should talk more about what I'm after. But it's something technical, and it's something business oriented. And I'm wondering, are we aligned? Do you accept all genres, or is it? You're making me interested in reading some poetry. I've been reading poetry today, oddly enough. So, So is this a good fit?
I think it would be, because people have been working across all different genres. And as I said, the techniques for writing are the same. I'm not going to be probably having model texts that are the same genre as you're working in. But it will encourage you to go find the model text that you need. And also, I think that reading really interesting literature makes us better writers, whatever genre we're working in. So in my in-person workshops, I always put genres together because I think that, for example, reading poetry is great for people who are working in any genre. If you're just writing, blog posts, you just get the language in your ear a little bit more and have more facility with the English language. And all the other techniques, I think, would be really helpful for you. Again, whatever you're working on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So just to clarify, so our own writing is not really part of the course. That's sort of something that we do separately or with the group or in another arrangement with you privately or whatever. Is that right?
So the way the course is, it's a little bit different. It's not like you have to hand this in and get a deadline to hand it in. If you want, a lot of people are sharing their writing on the Facebook group.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a buddy system. So if you want to be paired with a buddy, and you and your buddy then can do more intensive reading and sharing and critiquing. But the idea behind this course is that we are so often writing for immediate critique and feedback that keeps us blocked.
Yeah, yeah.
And people have found really, really expansive new ways of approaching their writing when they don't feel like they're immediately getting that kind of critique and feedback.
Yeah, no, I understand.
So if you take the premium course, then you get coaching with me, and that's one-on-one coaching. And you can use that to get more editorial feedback. And towards the end of the course, I always work with people to complete a project. And so we do kind of final polishing of that writing project. But we also talk about kind of taking more risks and being riskier and messier and trusting the process. So it's not just change this word, change this word, change this word throughout our work together.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to apologize. I have to leave you. Thank you so much. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you so much for being here. I hope to see you again.
Take care. Thank you.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
I think I'm going to bow out as well. Thank you, Nadia. That was just so wonderful. And thank you for answering my question.
You're welcome. I actually don't know.
Ashley.
Ashley. Thank you, Ashley. Okay.
Okay. Have a good
Bye.
afternoon.
Glad you were
Bye.
here.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions?
Oh, I have one other question. What time did you say what time it meets at?
So
Are the live videos?
actually, I need to transfer. I kind of updated my course page, and it was on the old course page, and I need to transfer it over. So they're optional, those meetings, and you get a recording if you can't make them live. And they meet at alternating between Wednesday at 7:30 Eastern Time PM and Thursday at 12:30 Eastern Time.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's for 8 consecutive weeks, is that right?
Yes, for 8 consecutive weeks.
Okay.
Does anyone else have questions? I'm gonna go plug in my computer. Just get my cord. I'll be right back. I was quite sure that I had enough power, but I think maybe when I'm doing this recording, it takes a little bit more juice. Okay. So I'm sorry we didn't have time to do the writing exercise. I offer a lot of free sessions where I'll lead a little writing exercise, and I have some of those on my website, and I just offered the 7-day writing meditation challenge. So we didn't have time for that today, but if you're interested in that, I'll definitely be offering those again. And you can also kind of poke around on my website for some of those if you haven't done them with me already, or send me an email and I can send you some.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I thank you all for being here, and I'll hope to see you again. If you have more questions about anything, reach out to me. Obviously, I'd love to see you in Align Your Story. I'm really excited about that class and that community. And thank you for taking time in your, I'm sure, very busy day to be here.
Thank you, Nadia.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Nadia.
Nadia.
Bye.
Bye.
Everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.